really like the Cavs all season, and I want to talk about it. I was kind of indifferent on re-signing Karis LeVert because he was very up and down, but okay value. I could see it. That's fine. But I like the other moves that they made. First, Max Strus, even though he gave him a little bit of a bag, he fills a much-needed void in jump shooting, man. Like, they really need some guys that can space the floor, and Gabe just left the
Gabe
string.
has said his internet has gone out from the storms, so we are a two-man crew for the time being.
All right, that's all good, man. All good. I can talk about the Cavs, man. I really enjoyed what they did, but Strus, man, I think that was a very key signing. Even though they did have to give up a couple guys in the signing trade, I don't hate getting rid of J.D. Osman. That's fine. Lamar Stevens was in and out of rotation. That's fine. I'm not the biggest George Niang guy, but I feel like he's some added shooting. He's a capable defender. So for the value that you got him for, I'm not really, tripping about that. So, I feel like they definitely upgraded. I like the Ty Jerome signing as a very low key one. I just think he's a very solid basketball player. And if he gets rotational minutes, he'll be fine. And the last piece I wanted to touch on was Imani Bates. He might amount to something or he might amount to nothing, but you spent a late second round pick on him. So I don't have any issues. If he turns into a player that people may have been thinking he could have been, like how he was supposed to be like a lottery top 10 pick before he got to college, that's a great move. So, I'm a fan of what the Cavs did, man. I think after the way their season ended, they definitely got a lot better in my book.
The Cavs. I feel like the summer was a lot of desperation from them. I'm going to be honest. This feels like some very desperate signings. This feels like these are some guys that kind of do what we need them to do, but there's nothing better, so we're going to settle with this, but I don't think it actually moves the needle that much. Max Strus, from a shooting standpoint, great. They needed more shooting. They needed someone who could give them a little bit of spacing. That's a good addition. Georges Niang, some shooting, some spacing, another good addition for that standpoint. But they still don't have a dude on the wing who can shoot and defend. It does not exist on this roster. And other than Georges Niang, they don't have guys with size who can do that on this roster. And Niang probably isn't playing for you in the postseason because he's just not good enough defensively. He might be able to shoot, but defensively, he just struggles way too much in the postseason to get regular minutes. It was even iffy with the 76ers this past year. He'd get some run, and then he wouldn't, and then he might get a 4 or 5 minute stint, and he'd just get played off the floor. Now, some nights he'd come in and hit 3 threes in a row for you, and it was great. But if he wasn't doing that, then he was pretty useless out there. So I see what the Cavs are trying to do here, and I appreciate the fact that they're trying to improve this roster with the limited options that they have to do so because of how much pick equity they've traded away to get Donovan Mitchell. But this just feels like we need to do something because we don't feel like we're good enough. But I don't think this pushes them much more towards any type of success. They have a little bit more shooting now. They have a little bit more spacing now. That might help their offense a little bit come the postseason. But for the most part, it's probably just Max Strus, who's a regular part of your playoff rotation, not Georges Niang. And that's a decent chunk of money to be paying someone and a decent use of your mid-level exception on a guy who's probably not a core part of your postseason rotation. And they still don't have that guy who can shoot and defend on the wing. They just need Isaac Okoro to continue to improve. And it looked like the back end of last year, he might have been starting to do that. And then he just didn't show up at all in the postseason. So that's still going to be the biggest thing for them is do they trade him to get that guy or does he become that guy? That's the biggest thing for them. They are better, but I still don't think they're anywhere near where they need to be to get above the Celtics, to get above the Bucks and be in that conversation. I still think they're a step below. I appreciate their efforts, but it felt like a very desperate summer of we need to make signings. The guys just weren't there for them to actually get what they need.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Yeah.
All right. Because you guys are just completely frozen. For me, I'm on the hot spot right now. Let me tell you, frozen screen me is going to tell you guys that it is storming in Ohio right now. It knocked out my Wi-Fi. And it's because these Cavs moves are kind of mid, bro. God was not a very big fan. Luckily, I can give the Cavaliers the benefit of the doubt. And the main reason why is because I think they can get a ton of improvement internally. They were a very above average, a very good regular season team last year, a very great defensive team. And they got into the playoffs and they kind of folded. And a lot of that was the star guys didn't really show up. Darius Garland was very inconsistent. Donovan Mitchell did not rise to the level that we've seen him rise to before. And Evan Mobley and Jared Allen kind of got dominated in the front court the entire series. So you look at that and it's like, yeah, while getting guys in the offseason and getting better that way would have been very helpful and would have been very nice. I think when the main issue on your team right now and coming out of last year, your main takeaway is, the guys at the top of the roster really did not step up in that situation. At least going into next year, I can come back and say, if they just live up to not even elevating in the playoffs, but just continuing to be who they were during the regular season, they look a lot better in the postseason come next year. And so at least short term, I'm far from pressing the panic button. I'm far from these are desperate issues that have to be solved right now. And while I'm not going to say this roster is perfect, the point about a nice 3-and-D wing is just still going to ring incredibly true. I do think in the long run, they're fine right now. And we should just kind of see where their star guys are at come a year or two down the road and really judge it based on that. Because I don't want to sit here and blame the surrounding pieces when really none of their 4 core guys I was too impressed with in the postseason last year.
Yeah, they all look kind of mid. Even Donovan Mitchell didn't look good in the playoffs. So, I think those guys need to just step up in the postseason. But I also think the Garland thing, I think that's why that was even kind of floating around, even if people don't believe the source was credible. I don't know. But the fact that the idea was even floating around, I think that's kind of showing they see what Devin's talking about. We need a really solid, consistent wing piece that can do a little bit of everything. And I think that's why Garland would be their most valuable trade chip. I also think there's probably down the line a Jared Allen trade somewhere. That's probably going to happen at some point. I think that's almost inevitable. Might not be, this summer. Might not be before the deadline. Might be next offseason. Who knows? But I think that's definitely a possibility. But I think for the time being, these are kind of filler moves. I do like the Strus signing a lot though, because they just did not have shooting anywhere around Garland, Mitchell. They did not have shooting. But I think adding, Strus, if Niang can just get in the rotation, if he can defend how he did against Boston, because he looked like a defensive player of the year candidate in some of those games. If he can defend like that, he should be able to find some consistent rotational minutes because he can shoot the 3-point shot at a better clip than, pretty much anybody on Cleveland was last season in catch and shoot situations. So hopefully he can just, be solid enough for them defensively to be on the court. But it's going to be tough, obviously with the 2 small guards, really take that big of a leap if you don't make that big splash trade for a really good wing player that can defend, shoot the 3-point shot. So, I still feel we're in the kind of the same boat last offseason when they made the Mitchell trade. This is a team, their window is definitely a little more down the line. And, we're just trying to see constant improvement from them year in and year out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at. I agree with what you say about a Jared Allen trade. I think that does seem pretty inevitable. They internally need to get to a point where they can feel comfortable putting Mobley at the 5 full time. Once that happens, then I think that's pretty inevitable. The thing to keep in mind is Donovan Mitchell is only guaranteed to be in Cleveland for the next 2 years. So even though we talk about a long window, they might only have 2 more years, and he might just opt out and decide that he wants to go play in New York or wherever else he wants to be. So I'm sure that's something that they're keeping in the back of their minds as well, and why they're trying to continue to make moves this offseason and probably again next offseason, because there's no guarantee that Donovan Mitchell is alongside Darius Garland beyond those 2 years. So we'll see how that goes, but they're at least trying to make the improvements that they can this summer. Whether it's enough, we'll see come the season.